Want to miss photos.
No. That might be I wasn't sure. Right. Exactly. I think it's a finish on that, right? Ooh,
Yeah, we'll just, yeah.
Oh, all right, I think we're ready to start. First of all, thanks so much to everyone for staying for this session. I realise it's at the end of a very busy two-day schedule, and it's brilliant to see the room so full, and also not just women in the room. I can see a lot of men as well have stayed for the session, which is brilliant. So this is a session on championing women in science. We've got some of the fantastic UKHSA women on the panel. And I'm Hannah Devlin. I'm the science correspondent at The Guardian, and I'm here to chair the session. So we're going to start off the session, I think, with asking some of our panelists about their careers, and starting off with asking them what they wanted to be when they were younger, and looking at how they ended up where they are today. So personally, I wanted to be a hairdresser when I was a child. That ambition didn't come true. I think some of the panelists' ambitions did come true. I was quite surprised that some of them actually wanted to be microbiologists and doctors. But I'm going to pick the jet pilot, and I wanted to just ask who was on the panel who was set out and wanted to be a jet pilot, and then maybe if you could just tell us, maybe not talk through your entire kind of career path, but I'd particularly like to hear if there was a turning point for each of you, some moment that kind of set you on the track to where you've ended up today.
If I'm being perfectly honest, it's because I watched Top Gun as a kid, and I thought that looked awesome.
And sorry, I should just ask, because we've got such a big panel, could you each introduce yourself?
Of course, that would be a good start, right? So yeah, I'm Lorna Jones, so I'm a PhD student at Chiltern. Yeah? Do you want, yeah?
Yeah, perhaps if we just each introduce ourselves first, and then I'll come to the...
Hi, I'm Catherine Ryan. I work at Porton Down in the preclinical assessment of vaccines.
Hi, I'm Megan Collin, epidemiologist in the COVID-19 Vaccines and Epidemiology Division.
Hello, I'm Katie Russell. I'm a medical epidemiologist, and I head up our emerging infections and zoonoses team at Colindale.
Hello, everyone. I'm Victoria Obudulu, Deputy Director, Statistics Production at UKHSA.
Good afternoon. I'm Nick Elvis. I'm the Interim Deputy Director for Colindale Site, National Standards, Quality and Safety, long job title, within Science Group.
Sorry, back to Lorna.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, it was Top Gun pretty much. But I think after a while, I kind of was at school and it kind of clicked science, and I don't know why. It was just a subject I really loved. And so then as I just got older, it was just that I realized that human biology was, so interesting because it was so varied. There's so many diseases and conditions, and how the human body actually even works is, amazing in itself. So I then looked at where I could focus my career on how I could help humans and help health in general. So I found to become a biomedical scientist, so testing blood samples, trying to help people who are gravely ill or who have a simple issue that they want to ask their doctor and be able to provide some sort of answer for them, that they can at least know what is happening. So then I kind of was in a hospital, and very morbidly, they actually did post-mortems on people, and I was just fascinated by the various toxicology things they did and the various assays and tests they had to implement. And it was just fascinating just seeing that all the different processes they have to do. So, and that's when I thought, do you know what, I really wanted to do something in toxicology. And now I get to do the best of both worlds of being able to be a toxicology, but also help human health. So that's pretty much how I got to where I am.
Thanks. Archaeologist.
So you might find a whole new perspective to your chief executive now. So I was a rather nerdy young person, and many of my colleagues will know I did Latin, ancient history and ancient Greek for my A-levels, not a science and sight. But actually, having done that, I wanted to do something by the end of the sixth form, which exactly is that, which was meaningful in humanitarian terms. So at 16, I would bomb off on my moped going and looking at archaeological sites, and was quite fixed on this. But somewhere I matured in those years and thought, well, I can do that in my spare time. I'm going to go off to medical school. And at that time, you could actually do what was a first MB course. So it's a bit like an extended graduate course. So I did all of my science A-levels, if you like, in what was effectively 8.5 months, I think, in the first year at a university. Went on to do medicine, and then intercalated a pharmacology degree, and then I became a real scientist. So trying to apply the science subjects that I'd learnt to a proper scientific study, and then on to medicine. But I think one of the interesting things is people often say, why on earth did you do Latin? I mean, there was a real advantage. I got got into the dissection room and I could just translate where every muscle was or where every bone was, and that made it a lot easier. But actually there is a logic in doing it. So where you place a word in a Latin sentence, how you rationalise and work through what endings you're going to put in a word, are actually all the same processes that you need to apply to rational scientific investigations. So there is a direct correlation over, particularly to public health investigation. So any budding archaeologists out there, you can easily come and join us in public health.
Brilliant, thanks. And did you manage to keep it up as a hobby in your spare time?
Not very much. I've got slightly busy with the public health stuff in later life.
Okay. Who wanted to be a microbiologist? I find that amazing that someone...
Yeah, that was me. Sorry. It was a really boring answer. But as I was thinking about this, why I wanted to be a microbiologist, I think I was around 14, 15, and that was when the first SARS pandemic hit. So I think that's what sparked my interest. And then I chose science A-levels, so biology, chemistry, and physics. I did okay in those. I got into Leeds University, study medical microbiology. Didn't love it, though, and when I left, I didn't really want to do science anymore. But I really didn't know what to do, so I ended up doing a master's at UCL in infection and immunity, I think just to pass the time, and I ended up doing a lot of lab-based work, and I actually really enjoyed it. And then I applied for an 8-month contract at Porton Down in 2012, and I've been there ever since. So yeah, and working during the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic this time, essentially, that's exactly what I wanted to do when I was 14. So I really enjoy my job. So yeah, it's worked out perfectly. It's a bit boring, but perfectly.
That's amazing. The ballerina, who's that?
That was me. Yeah, I mean, we're talking young, and I think I probably was only in it for the tutu, if I'm honest. So when I think reality sunk in, I think then the next thing I wanted to be a bit more seriously was an engineer. And I think I really just wanted to be that because that's what my dad had wanted to be, but he had dropped out of university, so he kind of never was able to fulfill those dreams, and so I think I absorbed that slightly. And so I think I was quite academic at school, but I didn't know if I had an exact direction that I wanted to go in. I think I was really lucky that my parents were very supportive of me, no matter what, to support any ambition I wanted to do. And so I think that was a really, that's what nested my initial interest in kind of pursuing science. And then I went to university, and then I think I went off engineering a bit. Was thinking about nursing, was thinking about pre-medical degree. I tried a bunch of different things, and I ended up it was a bit of like trial and error, really. I didn't have a specific direction of where I wanted to go, but I think I wanted to go in the health realm. And so I took a lot of different courses, and I ended up taking a nutrition course, which I really liked, and I think I liked that because it was very applied. It's very practical. You know, it affects us all. We all eat food. There's then a biological, metabolic process. It affects us all, and then there's a health outcome at the end. So I got my degree in nutritional science, and then I think kind of the same. I was like, I'm not sure exactly what I want to do with this degree, so I'll just do a master's. And then I did a master's in public health at Johns Hopkins, and then that really focused me in on, at that time it was more in an international health perspective. I came over to the UK, and then again, very much trial and error. I did some research at London School of Hygiene. I worked as a nutritionist in the community in Newham in East London. I went and worked at a hospital in the HIV clinic, and it was there when I was really focused on working in HIV that then I saw a job open up at the Health Protection Agency at that time in 2009 in the National HIV Surveillance Team. And I was like, I love data, and I like HIV and public health. This is perfect. It's applied. It's the sort of best of both worlds in terms of what I was interested in. And I've been there ever since, so that's been me.
Thanks, Megan. What about the veterinary surgeon?
That was me. I grew up in a house with lots of pets, and I was that really sort of typical 7-year-old girl who was obsessed with ponies. And I thought, right, I'm going to be a vet. I think one of our cats was quite sickly, so we ended up going to the vets quite a lot, and I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. And carried that on and really enjoyed science, and I got bought a chemistry set one Christmas and made things explode and change colour, and ended up with stains all over the bedroom floor and from all these chemicals I was spilling all over the place. And thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. And then I was doing a biology course, and one of my teachers, who probably changed the whole career trajectory for me, started talking about disease outbreaks. And she mentioned Ebola, and I'd never heard of this before. And she then came up afterwards and said, well, have a look at this book. And it was about the discovery of Ebola. And I was just fascinated, and it really sort of caught my attention that there were new diseases that were coming out. We knew about a lot of things, but there were all these new ones that were coming out of nowhere, and this was all about the discovery in what was then Zaire and now the Democratic Republic of Congo, and it just changed everything. And I thought, right, how do I get involved in this? And so I started doing a bit of reading around, seeing how you get involved in this type of work, because it seems so exotic and strange compared to all my experiences up to then. And decided, right, I want to do this through medicine. And so I went into medicine, but always knew I wanted to do something a little bit more unusual. And so when that first week of medical school, everyone said, what do you want to do? And there were people wanted to be cardiologists or surgeons or this or that. And I was like, no, I want to go and work with weird viruses in the middle of nowhere. And they thought I was quite weird. But carried on doing that, and then got into microbiology and virology, and then eventually decided actually epidemiology was where I wanted to be. And that was the sort of change then, and started doing public health training, and then realised actually a lot of my interest in animals back in early days were very relevant, because so many of those unusual infections came from an animal source. So actually all of that sort of research I'd done around a veterinary career actually was quite relevant to what I wanted to do. So yes, it all sort of came together, and then ended up working in emerging infections and zoonoses, which are those infections that can be transmitted back and forth from animals. So it sounds like it was all very planned, but it was a lot of serendipity along the way, from people that happened to say, have you heard about this, or something. So yeah.
Thanks. It's really nice to hear how there's so many of you. It feels like a few different threads have come together, and you've ended up, combining lots of interests. So the doctor, did the doctor become a doctor, or is it?
Unfortunately, no, it's me. So yes, I wanted to be a doctor when I was younger. And I remember this, I must have been about 8 or 9, and I was quite ill. My parents were worried, I was quite sick, so they rushed me to the hospital. In short, I was just in awe at the medical team that, dealt with me and made me feel comfortable and were concerned and looking after me. But it was the doctor that struck out. The kind of, I was, looking at the stethoscope and how he was, asking me questions and making sure I was okay. And it was like magical that whatever was doing me, I felt better, basically. And so after then I said, yeah, I want to be a doctor. So went on. By the time I got to secondary school, I was doing my science, lots of science subjects. I love science. And then it dawned on me that I really need to be really good with biology. And I was good with biology, but I kind of loved physics and maths a bit more than biology. And that drew me to engineering, and I decided to study chemical engineering at university. And that was twofold: my love of maths, physics and chemistry, actually, but also the job opportunities there, and it sounded kind of cool being a woman engineer. So I did that, and after a couple of years of work, I found myself in statistics, and I found myself actually doing a master's in applied statistics and operational research. And it does link with my studies in chemical engineering, where there's a lot of data and a lot of analysis involved in that. And I found myself in government, working as a government statistician. I've been doing that for like 14 years now. So yeah, that's me.
And I think that just leaves us with the scientist.
Yeah, when I was questioned as scientist, but I always did want to be a scientist. I wasn't quite sure what type. until I got to my A-levels. And I had an amazing biology teacher who introduced me to making wine and told me that microorganisms were involved in the production of wine. And that solved all my problems. But I didn't do microbiology straight away. I went to Edinburgh to do biochemistry, and then after the first year, I got a fascination with these tiny things that aren't supposedly as clever as we are as human beings. They don't even have a brain, and yet they outsmart us every time. And that was the thing that really got me on microbiology, was that we had these organisms that lived alongside us, within us, amongst us, and they generally got the better of us throughout our lives. You know, they outnumber all your human cells in your body, 9-to-1, I think it is, when you put it all together, consider everything that you've got within you. And that is just incredible. And then my mum was a home economics teacher, so I'd always grown up around food. And I did a placement during my degree for 6 weeks in the PHLS lab in Chester. And I worked with the food and water team there. And after starting out in farm to fork work down at the old lab we used to have at the Langford Veterinary School at the University of Bristol, I got my first opportunity to work in food, water and environmental labs, and came up here to Leeds and got my first job as the lead scientist at the Leeds Food, Water Environmental Lab. And from there, haven't looked back. So I built a career in food and water microbiology, and then moved just the end of last year into a deputy director role. So have been willing to move around the country and follow the science, but along the way I feel I've made the difference, and I've supported people through outbreaks and incidents, and been really part of improving public health and our health security overall. So I look back and I feel quite proud of the fact that I've had that role in helping people, and that's something that continues to drive me in my career.
Brilliant, thanks. I love that the turning point in your career was
winemaking.
learning how to make wine. So I wanted to bring it on to UKHSA, and in my job, sometimes I report on astronomy conferences, particle physics, and looking around the room compared to some of these fields, it feels as though maybe you haven't got such a serious issue with representation in terms of gender. But so I guess it brought me on to wondering, is there a tradition of women having a bigger role in public health, and kind of how that plays through to the UKHSA today? Is the organisation sort of very balanced in terms of gender, or are there pockets where there's sort of big disparities? So, maybe Jenny, you can start, but I'd be keen to hear from people on the other teams as well.
Yes, thanks. I think it is important to ask colleagues here, because they'll all come from different parts of our science group. Across the whole organisation, we're around 66% female, but there's a huge variation depending on grade and specialty as well. I was discussing with you earlier, public health generally, informal public health training, is actually quite women-friendly. You can often, obviously if you're in outbreak control mode, people will absolutely have to be there, and often for people working in labs, for example, you have to be on the front benches. But there are often lots of opportunities historically for part-time working, and I personally have benefited from that hugely. I'm really empathetic to ensuring for the whole organisation, not just for women, that people can bring that their work, their home into work, and their work to their home, when that works both ways. So I think in general it is, but for me personally, as I've moved up for medicine, for example, when I entered medicine, it was 25% women, so a very definite skew. And in fact, if you'd asked me what my earliest career move would have been, I really would have wanted to be a paediatric surgeon. I couldn't find a single women role model, and almost no female consultants. And it's the only time in my career where I've chosen not to do something because I was a woman. I couldn't see how to get there. But in public health, it was really good. In medicine, it's very good as well. What we are now actually a civil service organisation, and so one of the issues which I would think we would be able to contribute to and address is, as you get to very senior levels, the seniority element in senior civil service is not gender balanced, and that still applies to our own organisation. So I think our remit is to turn the tables and be the exemplar.
Yeah, and that's certainly an impression that I would have had from the outside, that from the medical side of public health, it's maybe something that has felt a kind of friendlier option for women. But what I'm curious about, maybe some of the more sciencey end of things, and maybe Victoria on the statistics. I mean, is your team, or the kind of statistics at UKHSA balanced? And if not, why do you think that might be?
Yeah, I was reflecting on this actually, and I think across government there is a good balance in the statistics profession. I think in the UKHSA we've got more needs to be done. So we've got good senior reps. My manager is a woman, a very influential woman. I can see her in the audience there. But I think we need to do more in getting more female representation in there. My own team, I've recruited quite a number of women in there, and I probably need to think about recruiting some men to kind of balance that out, ironically. But like in general, across my group, I think that maybe regarding professions like data scientists, we need more women in there. We need to do more to encourage women to apply. And it may be something to do with the nature of the job that we do in here. So at the, for the past 2 years, we've been focusing on the pandemic response, and that's been quite intensive and high profile. And maybe that has attracted maybe more men than women. I don't know, it's an assumption. But maybe as we move more towards our kind of business as usual structure, and we'll be able to give the message out there to women that this is a great organization to work for. We've got lots of varied opportunities, and we encourage you to join us.
Thanks. And are there any other people on the panel that are unusually working in teams where there's not so many women, and I'm just curious, or perhaps that's
Being looked at, so I feel like.
Oh.
I think in microbiology we do tend to, particularly at the lower grades, attract a lot of women into the field. It's one of those roles that you. Particularly for women with families that can be adapted around family life, and a lot of women can do the role and leave it behind at the end of the day. It's not something you generally take home. You don't have to do marking like you would do in teaching and other career aspects. But I think that we, particularly if you looked up the hierarchy within the scientific side, there are more men generally in the more management positions. And so although we look like we have a higher female balance within probably science group, there are things that would help that balance be better placed across all the grades and the roles that we offer, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'd like to ask as well, I mean, thinking about public health, people also have a personal perspective about what's important, and I'm interested in sort of why diversity is important for UKHSA from that perspective. Do you think that it's something that, aside from making sure that you're giving equal opportunities as an employer, is it something that improves the quality of what you're doing? Perhaps, yeah, Catherine.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think the outbreaks, the incidents that we deal with on a day-to-day basis involve all of society potentially, and therefore we need to ensure that we're thinking about how these outbreaks impact people, and to have a diverse workforce that can bring their own perspectives, recognise the challenges that the population might be facing is really important to allow us to give the best responses. So yeah, we should really be moving forward to make sure our workforce is diverse, bringing in people from all types of backgrounds so that we can ensure our responses are as strong and all-encompassing to provide the best we can for the populations that we serve. So I think it is really important that we have a good representation across the organisation in all different fields.
Just coming back to something that Jenny said before about the sort of one moment in your career where you chose not to do something, and maybe it wasn't a barrier in the sense that you'd wanted to do it and were turned down or experienced discrimination, but I'm interested in if other people have had experiences in their career where they have felt they've faced a barrier and what that's been, because sometimes it's not always the kind of most obvious of things that stop people from, achieving what they could achieve? It's a kind of open question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. I don't think it's like overt, especially not for me in my career. I guess more of it's based on when I was younger, just not having the confidence maybe to be loud or overly assertive, because I might get seen as aggressive or pushy. So just coming to terms and making sure that I'm confident enough to take opportunities where necessary, speak up in meetings where perhaps I don't feel as confident around my colleagues, and doing things like that, also encouraging other females that I work with to do the same as well. So fostering a good environment where we can all sort of encourage each other and develop each other, give each other opportunities, sort of do that sort of thing. And I think that's certainly nothing I've experienced at UKHSA has made me think that. Where I work with a very diverse workforce, we have a lot of well-respected women that I work with. It's more just a societal thing, I guess, just getting used to that. Why am I not confident in what I'm doing? And I think that sort of thing starts with like education, primary education, secondary education, and then into university, encouraging women and girls to be confident in what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that feeling of not feeling as confident, often that's grounded in having seen differences in the way people respond to, maybe a woman saying something versus a man saying something, either in a meeting or... I was interested in asking Megan about, obviously, you've been very visible on social media, and, we've kind of, especially as journalists, have relied on you kind of unraveling a complicated, COVID briefing in your fantastic Twitter threads. But I wondered, a lot of high-profile women on social media experience a negative side of that, and I wondered whether that's something that you've had to deal with. I think it probably is, and whether there's a sort of gendered element to that, and I guess how you deal with that as well.
Yeah, so I think, going out there on Twitter and exposing yourself, there's a risk associated with that. And there's been a lot of abuse leveled at scientists over the pandemic, which has really been difficult. But you do see some very specific abuse being directed at women, particularly women of color, I've noticed as well. And I think there is this, there can be a very perceived threat of a woman who is very intelligent and very smart and very vocal, and perhaps is stepping out of their place, or people being, finding it difficult to take the credibility of that woman to the same level as a man. So I've seen that quite a lot. I think in terms of dealing with that, I would say you have to have quite a thick skin to be able to let those comments ping off of you, but it does get to you at times, and it can be very hard. I think one thing I would say is that if I've been now doing this for 15 years, with that comes a growing of confidence. If I was a more junior scientist, I would have found that very, very difficult. And I think part of the growth to get to the place where you're able to be more vocal is allowing yourself to perhaps let go of being a perfectionist. I would say one thing that women sometimes, as a group, feel they have to be perfect all the time, and they have to do things right the first time, and that can sometimes hinder you from being out there. And that's reflected, I would say, in going out on social media and being out there. Is what if you make a mistake? What if you say the wrong thing? And I've made loads and loads of mistakes, so you don't have time to go through all the mistakes I've made, but it's through that we learn, and actually that is like the scientific process, really, isn't it? You try, you fail, you try again, till you get the right result, and then you share that result and then you move on. So I think there's something I would say, I guess is more directed towards junior scientists, but is to be brave and be confident in yourself, and allow yourself to try new things and allow it to fail or allow it to go a different direction and follow that if it's what you want to do. So yeah.
Just pick up on that point about it's maybe easier to be out there when you've kind of been in your area a bit longer. I'm interested in, Lorna, what someone more early on in your career, whether that's something you've feel or you're aware of, or maybe, hopefully, you're not, and you don't worry about it?
Well, I try not to make too many mistakes, otherwise my supervisor will have very few comments in the meetings that we have. But I must admit, I personally haven't felt too much of a gender bias, really. But I think that's probably due to the fact of women such as who are on this panel right now are being vocal and being confident enough to put those points forward so that, women like me and even, young women, young scientists, or hopefully young future scientists, don't feel like they have to be, or don't have to feel like they can't do what they want to do, and that pathway has already been put forward, and that you have those role models. For me, I didn't really have a female scientist role model, or someone who is out there that I could say, yeah, she's gone for it, and I can see that how she's done it is a great way, and that I can do it too. I mean, I was a very shy and, not very confident person. And it actually wasn't until I did some placements in a hospital, and I met a consultant there, and she actually was, had a lot of previous bad history with things, or like bad relationships, and she had to work to get to her consultancy level while being a mother and balancing everything. And actually, it really inspired me, is the fact that she could balance being a mother and do her education and still get to where she wanted to be. And it was great, because then it showed to me that anything is actually possible. And it's great to think that actually for women, anything really is possible. And there is no ceiling. There is only but sky and the extra space and the anything else that no one's found yet. But yeah, for me, I haven't personally found much of a challenge, but I think that's to the benefit of the women before me who have already put that platform down, that I don't feel I have to push too much, that as horrible as it seems, the hard work has already been begun, and all I need to do is give a bit more of a helping hand.
Nick, I think you wanted to come in.
I was just going to come in to say something I wish I'd thought early on in my career. I think I read it recently it was either on LinkedIn or some other channel, but that push to be genuine to who you are as an individual. I think a lot of us see the examples of behaviours in the workplace that we're in, and we try to copy them, and they don't necessarily fit with who we are as individuals. And what I'd really advocate the people coming up through their career is actually work out who you are and who you want to be within your career. And that's what you need to be genuine towards. It shouldn't just be about following the example of the person that's leading you or whatever. You find your path and you follow it. And that's really important, because it will make sure that you do the role that you want to do. And it's taken me time to get to that. I think I've copied lots of people in the past and come out of a meeting and gone, why did I say that? That's not who I am. And so actually taking some time to work out who you are as well, not just as a career scientist, but also as an individual, so that you're genuine to yourself, is really important.
Oh, that's a really good point. I wanted to ask about sort of things that can be put in place in workplaces that can make a difference. Because, I mean, there have been loads of external women in science initiatives, and not all of them seem to change things. So just kind of drilling down to a more organisational level, what are the things that you feel maybe have been important to you or have been important for the organisation? So I'm interested in mentoring, sort of transparency of data around, numbers of people in teams, and gender pay gap, that kind of thing. I'm kind of curious to hear both from a personal and maybe institutional level. Okay.
I'm just going to touch on the mentoring side of things, and I think that's really important, not just for very sort of senior and formal mentoring schemes, but actually pretty much all the women in this audience could take a role in mentoring for people in their teams, juniors or colleagues around them, because it's all about how we support each other. And it comes back to some of the things that have been said a couple of times here, giving people the confidence to know that they can apply for the next step or can apply for
the PhD that they might be thinking about doing or the training program they're thinking about. And sometimes that just needs a bit of a conversation to people. And I certainly will try always in the teams that I work with is to spend some time with each person in that team to find out a bit about them, what makes them tick, what do they want to achieve, how can we as an organisation help them achieve that. And I think that's something that everyone can do for all people in their teams, just be thinking about how do we develop people, how do we give them the confidence to take those opportunities that the organisation offers, and how do we sort of think about the blockers that may be there, which can be big in some cases. It might be people are worried about childcare or sort of full-time working and things like that, but it's looking at how we can overcome those. So I think formal mentoring schemes are brilliant. They can work really well, particularly as people move up to more senior roles. But actually, there's a lot we can do in an informal way within our teams to help people progress as well.
I actually have something about mentoring. When I applied for my PhD, I wasn't outside of IE. I wasn't in UKHSA at all. And I had no idea how to get into it. And luckily, someone gave me a contact to one of the scientists there, and she was so helpful. I'm hoping she might be in the audience. But it was great because it was a female scientist or female toxicologist who was already working in UKHSA, and it was someone who I was able to talk to. And she really did mentor me on to how to apply for a PhD, what's expected of a PhD, and what the life would be like. And, you know, it was great because I would converse with her. We'd have, video calls, and we would talk about, what I really wanted and if it was for me. And actually, I probably owe her the reason of why I'm here is because of her ability to give me the confidence to actually say that I could do what I wanted to do. So it is definitely that kind of mentoring, and it was more of an informal approach. It wasn't a formal setup, but it was great to see that another woman was able to mentor me and have that ability to apply to get a PhD. So I really do owe it to her that I'm actually here where I am right now.
Yeah, and just to extend the mentoring point, I think outreach programs are really, really important. So I think, we think about the full range of science opportunities, but maybe young people, young girls, young boys as well in secondary school don't know what the full spectrum of public health careers look like. So I think if we could go out to some secondary schools and have talks with them and, have some women doing those talks, that would really help. Another thing I'd like us to do is to think about our recruitment processes. So are we recruiting based on merit, or are we actually recruiting based on in our own image? So are we recruiting people that, behave like us, that, think like us, or, act the way we do? Because if you think about diversity in the full sense of it, it's not just about kind of the physical attributes of diversity that you can think of. So, sometimes we focus on things like age, gender, ethnicity, disability, but there's other lots of different aspects of diversity that are really important to think about. Things like our values, who we are, what we believe in. And when you think about the public health advice that we give, these things are crucial to how people respond. So if we don't take those into account in our recruitment, we're not going to have as many voices around the table as we could have that would help us to develop policy that will have the most impact. And the third point, if I may, is about thinking regarding outcomes, measurable outcomes. So we can have lots of initiatives to improve things, but are we making progress? It's really important. It links to the data point, actually. We need to be looking at the data, looking at the statistics, and making sure that we're having a positive trajectory, that we're seeing the change. And if we're not seeing the change, we need to reevaluate what we're doing and look back and change course and ask people, get feedback. But actually, it's the measurable outcomes that are important.
Megan, I think you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot to say about this. I think so. I had 2 points. So one, I think Victoria picked up. I think there's getting women into STEM, and then there's keeping women in STEM. And I think a challenge for this organization is keeping women in the organization, progressing their careers in science. And so I think that there's a number of different things, as we mentioned. I think one of the key things is representation. So I think we're really, I'm really happy that for the first time in the 15 years I've been here, the chief executive is a woman, which is fantastic, Jenny. We also have some fantastic women scientists in very high leadership positions. We've got Isabel and we've got Susan, which is fantastic to see. And I think there's, basically there's, as I said, Nick picked up, we may have more women in junior positions, but supporting careers up through the ranks is really, really important. And then, so that links to the second point, which is actually about some really practical support. And one of the things I would pick up is flexible working and job shares and things like that. So me, myself, I'm also an unpaid carer for my disabled son, and I have agreed flexible working hours. So I work 3 long days and 2 short. And I, honestly, I would, if I couldn't have that agreed, I would definitely have had to go down to part-time, or I maybe would have had to find another role if I didn't have that opportunity within this organization, and that support from my line manager and higher up. So I think there's some really practical things in terms of both recruitment, but also retention, and allowing women and men, but allowing this to fit within our families and our careers, and then continue that upward progression in order to make sure that the upper echelon is just as balanced as the lower echelon in future.
Right, I think we're drawing to the end, but I wanted to just finish by asking Jenny. I know that some people, or women I've spoken to in the past, have sometimes felt that it's only been once they've got to a really senior level that they've been able to become a really sort of outward champion for women in science, and only once they've fully established themselves as expert in their field. And I just wondered if that's something that you've experienced, and then perhaps just lastly, are there kind of particular things that you would like to kind of see change at UKHSA in this area?
It's a really interesting point, because actually I was asked to go and do a leadership discussion in one place, and I ended up with a title that said accidental leadership, because actually I suspect, like a lot of people here, scientists are very focused, all of us I think in UKHSA are very focused on what it is we're doing, and a lot of this, it's not about actually women, it's about getting on with the job, and what we're talking about is where that hinders progression of brilliant scientists, that we're seeing what the problems are. So for me, certainly I haven't experienced that difficulty myself until moving into the senior civil service, where all of a sudden, particularly moving into the deputy CMO role, I suddenly realised I would be in meetings across Whitehall, and I would be trying to spot the other woman in the room. Now, that was quite a strange experience for me. And I suppose, actually, as you say, rather late, and with that recognition, I've suddenly reversed round and looked and said, actually, this isn't right. This is not a balanced society in various places. We are trying to represent, as an organisation, the populations that we serve, and we have to get that right. But I think a lot of the comments here, which are really important, are ones where the organisation can help. So there are the formal elements, which I and EXCO colleagues can put in place, which is making sure we have fair recruitment processes, making sure every panel has a gender balance. Those are really quite basic ones. But a lot of the points are about culture. So the one that you made actually is a really interesting one, and colleagues will know here, I am off the scale introvert, so I need to have a space in a meeting where it's okay for me to or I used to, I've learnt, it's not how the senior civil service works, but, if we're encouraging scientists to come through, particularly women, we need to have cultures in meetings where you do not have to change your persona if you want to make a valid scientific point. We should value what I would think is quiet leadership at every single level of the organisation. So the responsibility for me and EXCO in setting the example for the organisation is to make sure that every different cultural approach is valued in every organisation. Every time somebody chairs a meeting, they are encouraging all sorts of inputs, whether it be quiet or loud, and bringing it back to the balance that we want. So I think although this is a women-labelled conversation, I suspect what we all want is the balance in the conversation and that representation of our organisation. And so, I mean, hopefully I will just reflect, because somebody pointed out to me at the end of the last 2 sessions, both of those were entire women panels, and I hadn't even noticed. And we've got this unbelievable display of talent across here in our junior staff coming through. So hopefully we're heading in the right direction, but with lots more to do.
All right, well, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks again to everyone who managed to stay for the final session. I'm going to hand over now to Jenny for some closing remarks.
So a huge thank you to Hannah for taking us through from ballerinas to doctors and beyond. Really big thank you for all of those scientists who've stepped forward onto what I did note yesterday was a very big stage. And it's my pleasure just to say thank you to all of you for contributing to what has been a brilliant 2 days, and I'm sure we'll do lots of reflection, just really demonstrating the breadth of the talent and the partnerships that there are across the UK, in UKHSA, across the UK, but actually globally as well. And as a final, but definitely not least point here, I'm going to introduce our chair, Ian Peters, who's going to do a closing remarks for the conference.
Thank you, Jenny. And I'm very aware I'm all that stands between you and your journeys home. It's somewhat daunting and humbling, as well as a privilege, to stand here today and formally close the proceedings. This is my first scientific conference. As my school teachers from long ago would testify, I am not wired to be a scientist. By academic training, a medieval historian turned social anthropologist may not be the obvious choice to be the first chair of the UKHSA. I think that had more to do with my executive career leading transformational change, and more recently 7 years as a non-executive director and then chair at Central North West London and Barts Health NHS Trusts, which between them span mental health, sexual health and acute hospitals in the country's most disadvantaged and ethnically diverse geographies. Firstly, a few thank yous to Hannah Devlin for facilitating the Women in Science panel. And in that context, I am delighted that the 3 most senior scientists in the UKHSA are women, and all 3 of them role models in their different ways. Thanks to all of you for joining us here in Leeds for UKHSA's very first conference. And I hope the protesters outside have not been too troublesome. And thank you in that context for all of your professional and patient response despite the provocation. Thanks to all of our speakers and presenters, session chairs, our exhibitors, and our volunteers. Thank you to Caroline Johnson, the Public Health Minister, for her video message of thanks, and to Sir Chris Whitty for joining us here and sharing his insights on epidemics past, present, and future, and the extraordinary power of science. And thank you to the Leeds Royal Armouries for hosting us. I hope you might have been able to take a moment to look around the museum, where the highlights for me, and I confess I got lost earlier, ranging from Henry VIII's foot combat armour, made in 1520 for the Field of the Cloth of Gold, to the largest elephant animal armour in the world from the 16th century India. And at the other end of the spectrum, one of the most iconic sci-fi weapons of all time, the pulse rifle from the 1986 film Aliens. We've been delighted to hold our first conference here in Leeds for several reasons. Leeds has faced very significant challenges during the pandemic, like every other city in the country. We heard a presentation from City Council at Team Leeds on their determination and innovation in reaching all communities and driving up vaccination rates across the city. Leeds University is in the process of becoming an official WHO collaboration centre. Leeds is the home of many staff from 4 NHS divisions, Digital, E, HEE, and the Leadership Academy, and hosts one of the largest NHS teaching hospital trusts in the UK, superbly led by Dame Linda Pollard and Sir Julian Hartley. The Leeds Academic Health Partnership enables companies to connect with NHS clinicians. There is a network of 250 medtech companies, the largest in the UK, and Leeds has a £350 million investment programme as part of the UK's life sciences industrial strategy to increase UK growth in that sector. And finally, we at UKHSA are absolutely committed to being active and visible across the whole of the UK. Indeed, our next advisory board meeting is in Bristol. Closing this first UKHSA conference, I'd like to reflect back on our first year and on what we've shared here with you over the last 2 days. At this point, I should acknowledge that unfortunately I could not be here yesterday as planned due to a serious illness in my family. I will also look ahead at what UKHSA's mission means for us all here. We all want to live in a world that's secure from health threats. In living memory, this has probably never been more so since the arrival of COVID-19. The impacts of the pandemic have been felt far and wide across the globe. Few, if any, areas of life were left unchallenged. And as with most health threats, COVID-19 disproportionately impacted deprived, disadvantaged, and vulnerable groups. The need to keep striving for equitable outcomes has been brought into ever sharper focus. Without the role of health security, the impacts of COVID-19 would have been felt across all populations even harder, even deeper, and for far longer. For most of us here, COVID-19 is likely to be the greatest public health challenge we've faced. But as is often the case in history, a time of challenge has led to a time of innovation, collaboration, and opportunity to strengthen our public health protection system. As part of our public health reforms, UKHSA was conceived and born during the pandemic by bringing together the skills, the expertise, the cultures, and the assets of 3 organisations. We are a learning organisation. We learned what worked well and what did not work so well during the pandemic. And we will continue to embrace the insights and the learnings as we move through the UK COVID-19 inquiry. As set out by Jenny in her opening speech, UKHSA's mission is firstly to prepare for health threats, secondly to respond to those threats, saving lives and reducing harm through an effective and proportionate response with the help of our partners, and thirdly to build the UK's health security capability and capacity for the future. Jenny also recognised that in our first 9 months, we faced an unprecedented variety of health threats in the UK. These have included cases of Lassa fever, a case of Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, unexplained cases of hepatitis in children, a major monkeypox outbreak, the discovery of polio in wastewater, and a very large outbreak of avian flu, all alongside the 10,000 health-related incidents and hazards the team deal with every year. We also faced record-breaking temperatures during the summer, which led to an estimated 3,000 heat-related excess deaths and highlighted the ever-emerging health risks of climate change. During our first year, we have had a difficult birth, bringing disparate organisations and cultures together in 6 months in the midst of a pandemic. We are partway through a likely 3-year period of transformational change, with much organisational and cultural development needed, and with a largely new leadership team. Building on excellence in science, data and operations, being excellent at collaboration, strategic partnerships, displaying openness and appropriate commerciality are some of the facets that should define us and enable us to spark innovation to improve health outcomes and protect and stimulate the economy while demonstrating value for money. We are now in some respects a typical adolescent, developing fast, occasionally losing our balance, forming our personality and identity, exploring and defining our boundaries. We have scaled up massively for Omicron, a truly extraordinary feat in global logistics and supply chain management. And we have downsized in line with living with COVID at a scale and pace which is remarkable given the paucity of adverse commentary. My particular thanks for all of this go to our various commercial partners, our academic colleagues, our global peers, local authority partners, our wider health system partners, volunteer organisations, and community leaders. In the last year, we have also operated in a context of significant and indeed continuing political change, and a continuously evolving pandemic with its variants and waves. Throughout that change, we have remained constant to our core purpose. While we are not perfect, we are building the trust of politicians, the general public, and our academic and global health partners, and increasingly our private sector partners. That trust is essential for UKHSA to be effective and to thrive. It is hard to earn and all too easy to lose. The welcoming of the Vaccine Task Force into the UKHSA family is in some respects evidence of that trust, and we need to build on their learnings and experience into the future. UKHSA and its health protection system partners needs to operate increasingly globally, nationally across the UK, and locally. And I would argue here that we do not yet have the balance right between centralisation and appropriate local variation. In the last 18 months, I've had the privilege to meet hundreds of colleagues across UKHSA, whether they be in Porton Down, Colindale, Chiltern, or our regional and central teams. Those visits are inspiring, educational, and bring home historic levels of underinvestment, which we are now addressing. They also drive home the commitment, dedication, professionalism, and creativity of our people. Some of you are here today. Thank you all. Turning to the last 2 days, I hope this conference has demonstrated how we are setting about our mission with steadfast determination. Yesterday, we formally launched the UKHSA's Centre for Climate and Health Security to strengthen the scientific evidence on the health effects of climate change for policymakers. Yesterday, Jenny mentioned the Centre for Pandemic Preparedness. It will gather the best global evidence on the COVID-19 pandemic and develop recommendations on what works for the future. Today, we explored the ambitions of the new Centre for Vaccine Evaluation, which will be a focal point for our partnerships with industry and international bodies, helping us bring new investment to the UK. By generating evidence and guidance that can inform action, UKHSA is adding significant value to our partners. The comprehensive breadth of topics covered over the 2 days, I hope, conveys our ambitions for the nation's health security. Our programme has included genomics, radiation, chemical environmental hazards, including air quality, monkeypox, hepatitis C, avian flu, AMR, behavioural science, and data-driven decision-making. We've also hosted plenary sessions on global health security and public health protection systems. I hope you've all had the opportunity to join some of the workshops, visit the exhibition, and watch demonstrations and attend the poster session. This has been UKHSA's first annual conference. We aim to give you a much greater knowledge and understanding of how we are working, collaborating, and partnering with the wider public health protection system to prepare, prevent, and respond to health threats. I hope we've also demonstrated how we are facilitating innovation and supporting the UK's competitive advantage in health science, technology, and academia. Given you insights into UKHSA's unique blend of world-leading science, data analytics, and operational expertise that can protect people across the country. And shared valuable lessons learned so far from the pandemic at a local, national, and global level. And finally, brought the wider health sector together to meet face-to-face and provided a great opportunity to network, to build new partnerships, and strengthen cooperation. And I've personally enjoyed being able to meet with some of UKHSA's important partners. In her opening remarks, Jenny said that she wanted the conference to make and renew connections, to spark ideas which in time would help save lives and protect the economy. Only you can judge whether it has achieved those objectives. She also gave a rallying cry to do more together, which I completely endorse. We will only succeed through collaboration. We should avoid regressing to closed and silo behaviour. Finally, this is an opportunity to say thank you to all of our colleagues in UKHSA for your relentless determination, professionalism and resilience in helping to shape our new world-leading health security agency that sits at the heart of a stronger health protection system. One paradox for UKHSA and its partners is that we are often at our best when we don't make the news. COP26 and most recently the Birmingham Commonwealth Games are both exemplars of thorough planning and flawless delivery from a health security perspective. There were no health incidents at either. There were no headlines. If I can just take a few more moments, I would like to welcome our new non-executives who come from a diverse set of backgrounds and perspectives and are already adding real value. Some of them have been here and have contributed to this conference. I would also wish to recognise the extraordinary resilience and leadership of Jenny over the last 18 months in what has been a searingly challenging and highly rewarding context. A special thank you to our conference team, Lisa Bullock, Sophie Zinker, Isabel Wakely and Natalie Ose-Owuzu, who have worked so hard and meticulously to organise this fantastic event. We look forward to inviting you back to our conference in 2023. Have a safe trip home. Thank you.